When my sister and I were kicked out of our last foster home, we bought a rusted-out diner for $5. What we discovered inside would change not only our lives, but the fate of an entire town. This is that story. If you've ever felt lost and wondered if there was a second chance waiting for you somewhere, hit that subscribe button. You're in the right place. The air inside the Greyhound bus tasted like disinfectant and regret. Every few minutes, the tires would hum over a seam in the asphalt, a rhythmic thud that vibrated up through the worn seat and into my bones. Outside, the gray smear of the city was finally giving way to the green blur of the countryside. My sister Maya was asleep, her head resting against the cool glass of the window, her breath fogging a small circle that expanded and contracted with each exhale. She was 17, but in that moment, she looked about 10. Small, vulnerable, and utterly dependent on my next bad decision. I had just turned 18. My birthday present from the state of California had been a manila envelope containing my birth certificate, a final check for $212, and a firm handshake from a social worker who couldn't quite meet my eyes. Happy birthday. You're an adult now. Good luck. In my pocket, folded into a stiff square, was a deed, or rather, a legal notice about a deed. It was printed on cheap paper, the ink slightly fuzzy, and it smelled faintly of stale coffee and bureaucracy. It had arrived 2 weeks before my 18th birthday, a stray piece of mail forwarded from our last known family address, an address we hadn't lived at in a decade. It was from a law office in a town I'd never heard of, Harmony Creek. The letter was addressed to me, Leo Vance, and it explained, in dense legalese, that I was the beneficiary of a conditional inheritance from my late grandmother, Rose Vance. The inheritance was a commercial property, a diner, and according to a bizarre stipulation in her will, upon reaching the age of legal majority, I had the right to purchase said property for the sum of $5. 5. Not 5,000, not 500. 5 crisp single-dollar bills. Maya had been the one who found the town on a cracked phone screen. Harmony Creek, population 482. A tiny dot stranded in the sprawling agricultural plains of the Central Valley, hundreds of miles from the coastal city we'd always called home. "It's real," she had whispered, her eyes wide with a desperate kind of hope that I had lost years ago. "Leo, we have to go. It's a sign." I didn't believe in signs. I believed in the weight of my backpack pressing into my shoulders, the dwindling number in my bank account, and the hollow feeling in my chest that had been my constant companion since our parents died. Signs were for people with options. We had none. We had been informed, gently but firmly, that with me aging out, the foster system could no longer justify keeping us in the same home. Maya would be moved to a group facility. We would be separated. For the first time in 10 years. That was a reality I couldn't accept. The thought of it was a physical pain, a tightening in my throat that made it hard to breathe. So, I made a choice. I took the $212, cashed it out, bought 2 one-way bus tickets to the middle of nowhere, and sent a $5 bill in a certified envelope to the law office of a Mr. Abernathy in Harmony Creek. It felt like the single most insane act of my life. We were trading a known, miserable future for a completely unknown one, armed with nothing but a strange inheritance and the clothes on our backs. As the bus rumbled on, I watched the landscape flatten out into an endless checkerboard of dusty fields and irrigation ditches. The sky was huge and pale blue, a stark contrast to the sliver of gray we were used to seeing between tall buildings. Maya stirred beside me, her eyes fluttering open. She blinked, looking out at the vast emptiness. "Are we there yet?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "Almost," I lied. The truth was, I had no idea. The bus driver had told me he'd let us off at the junction, a crossroads with a gas station and a blinking yellow light. From there, it was another 3 miles to Harmony Creek. We'd have to walk. I didn't tell her that part. I just looked at her face, at the faint scar above her eyebrow from a fall she took when she was 6, a fall I was supposed to have prevented. Loyalty. That's what this was about. My loyalty to her, the only solid thing left in my world. The diner wasn't a sign, it was a lifeboat, and it was probably full of holes, but it was the only one we had. The social worker, Ms. Albright, had tried to talk me out of it. She sat across from me in her sterile, beige office, a look of profound pity on her face. "Leo," she'd said, her voice soft and reasonable, "this is a fantasy. A dilapidated building in a dying town? What are you going to do with it? You have no money, no skills, no support system there." She had a point. All of her points were valid. She'd even found another offer for us, a letter from a development corporation called Apex Holdings. They had been trying to acquire the land the diner sat on for years. They were offering $5,000. "Take the money, Leo," she urged. "It's not a lot, but it's a start. You can get a security deposit on an apartment. I can help Maya get placed in a group home nearby. You can see each other on weekends." The words were meant to be comforting, but they landed like stones. An apartment for me, a group home for her. Weekends. The system's solution was to neatly sever the only bond that mattered. $5,000 felt like a bribe to accept the unacceptable. It was the price of our separation. I looked at the crisp corporate letterhead from Apex Holdings and felt a cold knot of anger in my stomach. They didn't know us. They didn't know our grandmother. They just saw a piece of land, a line item on a spreadsheet. Ms. Albright saw a problem to be managed, a case file to be closed. I folded the Apex letter and pushed it back across the desk. "No, thank you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're going to Harmony Creek." Her expression hardened slightly, the pity replaced by a flicker of professional frustration. She saw a stubborn, foolish kid making a life-altering mistake. She couldn't see the terror behind my eyes, the fierce animal instinct to protect my sister from being swallowed by the same system that had chewed me up and was now spitting me out. She didn't understand that $5,000 was an ending, while a rusted diner for $5, however insane, was a beginning. It was a chance, however small, to build something for ourselves, together. On the bus, with the setting sun painting the horizon in shades of orange and purple, I replayed that conversation in my head. Had I made the right choice? The weight of that question was heavier than any backpack. Maya leaned forward, pressing her face against the window again, her eyes scanning the darkening landscape. "I hope it has one of those spinny stools," she said, her voice a small, hopeful whisper in the quiet of the bus. "Grandma Rose always said she'd get me a milkshake and let me sit on a spinny stool." I remembered that promise, a faint echo from a life before this one. A life with parents, a home, a grandmother who smelled like cinnamon and coffee. A promise made to a little girl who hadn't yet learned that most promises get broken. I reached over and squeezed her shoulder. "Me too," I said. And in that moment, I prayed to a God I wasn't sure I believed in that the diner was still standing. I prayed it had spinny stools. I prayed it was more than just a pile of rust and broken dreams. The bus hissed to a stop at a desolate crossroads. A single gas station, its sign flickering erratically, cast a sickly yellow glow over the cracked asphalt. A lone blinking traffic light swung in the wind, a silent, lonely metronome marking time in the middle of nowhere. "This is you," the driver grunted, not bothering to turn around. The doors folded open, letting in a blast of cool night air that smelled of dust and damp earth. We were the only ones getting off. We hoisted our backpacks, murmured our thanks to the driver's back, and stepped down onto the gravel shoulder. The bus pulled away with a groan of hydraulics, its red taillights shrinking into the darkness until they vanished completely, leaving us in an immense, overwhelming silence. The kind of silence that buzzes in your ears. For a long moment, we just stood there, two small figures dwarfed by the vast, dark expanse of the valley. The sky was a black velvet blanket, punctured by a million tiny, brilliant stars, more than I had ever seen in my life. "Well," Maya said, her voice sounding unnervingly small, "this is it." I pointed down the narrower of the two roads, a strip of dark asphalt that disappeared into the blackness. "Harmony Creek is that way, about 3 miles. I saw her shoulders slump. I'd been hoping the reality of the walk wouldn't hit her until daylight. "We can do it," I said, forcing a confidence I didn't feel. "It's flat. We'll just walk." And so we did. We walked down the center of that empty road, the only sounds the crunch of our sneakers on loose gravel and the chirping of crickets in the unseen fields around us. The air grew colder. We pulled our thin jackets tighter. We didn't talk much. There was nothing to say. The excitement of the journey had evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard reality of our situation. We were two kids, alone, walking toward a town we'd never seen and a building that was probably condemned. The $5,000 from Apex Holdings started to sound less like a bribe and more like a winning lottery ticket. Every step took us further away from that possibility, further into the consequences of my choice. After what felt like an eternity, a few dim lights appeared on the horizon. They grew slowly, resolving into the shapes of houses, a church steeple, the silhouette of a water tower against the starry sky. Harmony Creek. As we entered the town limits, the silence shifted. It was no longer the empty silence of the fields, but the sleeping silence of a community. We walked down Main Street. It was a single block of brick-fronted buildings, their windows dark. A post office, a grocery store with a hand-painted sign, a barber shop. It was like a town from an old movie, preserved in amber. And then we saw it. At the far end of the street, on a corner lot, stood our inheritance. The moonlight bathed it in a ghostly silver, and my heart sank. Dilapidated was a generous word. It was a classic 1950s diner, the kind with a long, curved body of stainless steel, but the steel was streaked with rust, like it was bleeding. The large plate glass windows were either boarded up or shattered, leaving jagged, gaping holes. The sign on the roof, which must have once proclaimed "Rose's Place" in bright neon, was a skeleton of twisted metal and broken tubes. Weeds, thick as my arm, had conquered the parking lot, their tendrils climbing the walls of the diner itself, as if nature was trying to drag it back into the earth. It wasn't a lifeboat, it was a shipwreck. Maya stopped beside me, her breath catching in her throat. I waited for the tears, for the accusation, for the inevitable "I told you so" that I so richly deserved. Instead, she whispered, "It's perfect." I turned to look at her, certain I had misheard. Her face was illuminated by the moonlight, and her eyes were shining. Not with despair, but with a kind of fierce, proprietary wonder. "It's ours, Leo," she said, her voice filled with a conviction that stunned me. It's really, truly ours." She walked toward it, her steps slow and reverent, as if she were approaching a sacred place. I stayed rooted to the spot, torn between her impossible optimism and the crushing weight of reality. The place was a ruin. Fixing it would take a miracle. Or money. We had neither. But as I watched my sister reach out and lay a hand on the cold, rusted metal of the door, a tiny, fragile seed of her hope began to take root in the barren soil of my own fear. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was perfect. Perfectly impossible. Perfectly ours. The next morning, we met Mr. Abernathy. His office was a small, dusty room above the grocery store, crammed with sagging bookshelves and stacks of yellowing legal files. He was a man in his late 70s, with a shock of white hair and eyes that were surprisingly sharp and kind behind thick glasses. He looked us up and down, his gaze lingering on our worn-out backpacks and the exhaustion etched on our faces. "Vance, kids," he said. It wasn't a question. "You look like your grandmother." He gestured for us to sit in 2 rickety wooden chairs. He retrieved a thick file from a cabinet and placed it on the desk between us. "Rose was a stubborn woman," he began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Stubborn as a mule and twice as smart. She loved you two more than anything. She talked about you all the time." He opened the file. Inside was the official deed along with a cascade of other documents. He explained the stipulation. Rose had foreseen a future where we might be left with nothing. She knew the foster system, knew how kids could fall through the cracks. This diner, this piece of land, was her safety net, a tangible place in the world that belonged to us. "There's something else you need to know," he said, his expression turning serious. He pulled out a sheaf of letters. They were from Apex Holdings, the same company that had made us the offer. The letters went back 15 years. They had been trying to buy this land since before we were born. "They want to build a new distribution center just outside of town," he explained. "Your grandmother's lot is the key. It provides the only viable access point to the main highway. Without it, their project is dead in the water." He slid the most recent letter across the desk. It was an official offer, addressed to him as the executor of the estate, for $50,000. I stared at the number, the zeros seeming to mock me. 50,000, not 5. It was a life-changing amount of money, an escape, a real one. "They don't know you're here," Mr. Abernathy said. "They assume the property will be declared abandoned and sold by the county. Their offer is a lowball, an attempt to get it cheap before it goes to public auction. They think it's just an empty lot with a ruin on it. They don't know it has owners." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on me. "The choice is yours, son. You can sell, take the money, and nobody in this town would blame you. It's a fortune. Or you can keep it." My head was spinning. $50,000. I could get Maya a real apartment, not a group home. We could go to community college. We could eat without worrying where our next meal was coming from. It was the sensible choice, the adult choice. I looked at Maya. She was staring at the letter, her face pale. She wasn't seeing the money. She was seeing the end of the dream she had just allowed herself to have. She was seeing the for sale sign going up on the one thing we had ever owned. I thought about my grandmother, a woman I barely remembered, but who, according to this kind old man, had been smart and stubborn. She had held off a corporation for years. She had built a safety net for us out of steel and rust and legal loopholes. Was I going to be the one to sell her legacy for a quick payday? "Can we see it?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Inside?" Mr. Abernathy nodded slowly. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a single, heavy iron key attached to a simple wooden tag. The word Rose was burned into the wood. He slid it across the desk. It felt impossibly heavy in my hand. "It's yours," he said. "Whatever you decide to do with it." We walked back to the diner, the iron key cold in my palm. The daylight was less forgiving than the moonlight. It exposed every flaw, the peeling paint, the rust patches that looked like angry sores, the jagged edges of the broken glass. It smelled of decay and dampness and forgotten things. The front door was jammed shut with rust and time. We had to go around the back. The rear door groaned in protest, the hinges screaming as I put my shoulder into it and forced it open. The air that rushed out was stale and thick, like the exhalation of a tomb. We stepped inside. The darkness was broken by shafts of dusty sunlight slanting down from the boarded-up windows, illuminating a scene of perfect chaos. The floor was covered in a thick layer of grime, littered with debris and fallen ceiling tiles. The red vinyl on the booth seats was cracked and split, the yellow foam stuffing spilling out like guts. The long Formica countertop was grimy, and behind it, the kitchen was a disaster of overturned equipment and cobwebs. But it was all there. The bones of the place were good. The counter, the booths, the kitchen layout. And yes, lined up along the counter were 6 chrome stools with torn red seats. Spinny stools. Maya walked over to one, brushed the dust off, and tentatively sat down. She gave a little push with her foot, and with a low squeak, she spun. A slow, hesitant circle. A small, watery smile touched her lips. "See?" she whispered. We spent the next few hours exploring, our footsteps echoing in the silence. It was like walking through a memory. We found a rack of old menus, the prices impossibly low. Coffee, 10 cents. Rose's famous apple pie, 25 cents. We found stacks of chipped ceramic plates and heavy glass sugar shakers. In the kitchen, we found a massive silent grill and a walk-in freezer with a door so heavy I could barely budge it. It was overwhelming, the sheer scale of the mess, of the work that would be required to bring this place back to life was staggering. Every broken thing was another bill we couldn't pay. Every layer of grime was another hour of work. The $50,000 offer loomed in my mind, a constant, seductive whisper. It was the easy way out, the smart way out. As I stood in the middle of the ruined kitchen, the weight of the decision pressing down on me, Maya called my name. Her voice was strange, muffled. "Leo, over here, come look at this." I found her in the main dining area, crouched down by the booth in the far corner, the one tucked away from the door. One of the floorboards was loose. It had been pried up slightly at one end. Curiosity overriding my despair, I knelt beside her. I wedged my fingers into the gap and pulled. The board came up with a splintering groan, and there, nestled in the dark, hollow space beneath the floor, was a metal box. It was an old cash box, painted black, with a simple lock on the front. It was heavy. We lifted it out and set it on the dusty table of the booth. My heart was hammering against my ribs. What was this? What had our grandmother hidden here? We didn't have a key for the box. I found a heavy-duty screwdriver in the mess of the kitchen, and, after 10 minutes of prying and grunting, the lock finally gave way with a sharp crack. We lifted the lid. There was no gold, no jewelry. The box was filled with envelopes, tied together with a faded red ribbon. They were addressed, in a looping, elegant script, to "My Leo and my Maya." On top of the stack of letters was a smaller, thicker envelope. It had no name on it. I opened that one first. Inside was cash. Old bills, neatly stacked and wrapped in paper bands. I counted it, my hands shaking. $10,000. It was her life savings. Tucked beneath the money was a single, folded piece of paper. A note. It was from our grandmother. Her handwriting was the same as on the envelopes, beautiful and clear. "My dearest children," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you have found your way home. I am so sorry I could not be there to welcome you. This money is for a new beginning. Use it wisely. But the real inheritance is not in this box. It is in the letters. Read them. Understand. And know that I have loved you every single day. All my love, Grandma Rose." I felt a lump form in my throat. Maya was crying silently beside me, tears tracing clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. This wasn't just money. It was a message. A final gift from a woman we barely knew, but who had clearly known and loved us. We sat there, in that dusty, forgotten booth, and we began to read. I opened the first letter, dated 15 years ago, and read it aloud, my voice echoing in the empty diner. It was her story, a story we had never been told. She wrote about her love for the diner, how she and our grandfather had built it from nothing. She wrote about the town, the people, the life they had made here. Then the tone shifted. She wrote about the arrival of Apex Holdings. They came with slick lawyers and big promises, wanting to buy her out. She said no. The diner was her home, her legacy. But they were persistent. They started playing dirty. They filed frivolous complaints with the health department. They lobbied the town council to rezone the area. They made her life a living hell, trying to squeeze her out. She wrote about her fear, not for herself, but for us. She knew our parents were struggling. She was afraid that if anything happened to them, we would be left with nothing, and Apex would swoop in and steal our inheritance. That's when she came up with the plan. The $5 sale. It was a brilliant piece of legal maneuvering she and Mr. Abernathy had devised. She sold the diner to the town of Harmony Creek in a trust, with the unbreakable stipulation that her legal heirs could reclaim it for the purchase price. To make sure Apex lost interest, she had to make the property look worthless. She had to let it die. "It broke my heart, Leo," I read, my voice cracking. "Every time I let a new piece of rust form, every time I didn't fix a leaky pipe, it was like a piece of me was dying with it. I had to make it look abandoned, neglected. I had to make them believe I had given up. But I never gave up on you. This place, it's not a ruin, it's a fortress. I built these walls of rust and decay to protect what's inside, to protect your future. I knew they would come back one day. They are vultures. They will offer you money. It will seem like a lot. It might be the easiest choice. But I am begging you, my children, don't let them win. This land is more than just land. It's our story. It's your home, if you choose to make it one." The letter went on, detailing every part of her fight. She had documented every threat, every underhanded tactic Apex had used. She had kept records, made copies of documents. It was all there in the box. A complete history of their corruption. The final letter was dated just a few weeks before she passed away from cancer. Her handwriting was shaky, but the words were strong. "I'm tired now," she wrote, "but I'm not scared, because I know that one day you will come. You will find this, and you will be faced with a choice, the easy path or the right one. I can't make it for you, but I raised your father to be a fighter. I know that same strength is in you. This diner is sleeping, not dead. Wake it up. Bring the life back to this place. Fill it with the smell of coffee and the sound of laughter again. Make it yours. That is my final wish. When I finished, the silence in the diner was profound. The dusty shafts of light seemed to hold their breath. The weight of her words, of her sacrifice, settled over us. She hadn't abandoned this place. She had protected it. She had endured years of pressure and heartbreak, all to preserve this one small piece of the world for 2 grandchildren she barely got to know. The $10,000 wasn't just savings, it was seed money. The letters weren't just a story, they were a battle plan. And the $50,000 offer from Apex wasn't an escape, it was a surrender. It was letting the vultures win, just as she had predicted. I looked at Maya. Her tears were gone, replaced by a look of fierce, unwavering determination. She looked older than 17 now. She looked like her grandmother. "We're not selling," she said, her voice quiet but absolute. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a declaration of war. I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not hope, exactly. It was something harder, stronger. It was purpose. I thought of Ms. Albright, of the foster parents who had seen us as a paycheck, of the whole world that had written us off as broken kids with no future. They were all wrong. Our grandmother knew who we were. She knew we had fight in us. I picked up my phone. I still had the number for the Apex lawyer from the letter Ms. Albright had given me. My hands were steady as I dialed. A slick, professional voice answered on the second ring. "Mr. Davies?" "My name is Leo Vance," I said, my voice clear and cold. "I'm the owner of the property on Main Street in Harmony Creek." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a moment of surprise. "Ah, Mr. Vance, we were hoping to hear from you. We have a very generous offer for that parcel of land. $50,000. We can have the paperwork to you by the end of the day." "I know about your offer," I said. I could feel Maya's hand on my arm, her grip tight. I could feel my grandmother's legacy all around me, in the dusty air, in the silent, waiting stools. "And my answer is no." Another pause, this one longer, tighter. The professional slickness in his voice evaporated, replaced by a sharp edge of annoyance. "I think you're making a mistake, son. That property is worthless, condemned. The land value is minimal. Our offer is more than fair. It's charitable." "No," I repeated. "The property is not for sale. Not now. Not ever. And one more thing. I have records. 15 years of them. Records of your company's harassment and predatory tactics against my grandmother, Rose Vance. I suggest you stop calling." I hung up before he could respond. I dropped the phone on the table. The echo of the click seemed to seal the decision. There was no going back. We had chosen. We had chosen the hard path, the right path. We were staying. We were fighting. We were waking the diner up. The first few weeks were the hardest. The $10,000 from our grandmother felt like a fortune. But we quickly learned how fast money disappears when you're trying to raise a building from the dead. The first expenses were practical, brutal. We had to get the power and water turned back on, which required inspections and deposits and a mountain of paperwork. We had to buy cleaning supplies in industrial quantities: bleach, scrapers, buckets, mops, and more trash bags than I could count. Our first home was the corner booth, where we laid out our sleeping bags each night. We ate canned soup heated on a small camping stove we bought at the town's hardware store. Every muscle in my body ached. My hands were raw, covered in blisters and cuts. We started by simply cleaning. We filled dozens of trash bags with debris. We scraped years of grime off the floors and counters. We scrubbed the vinyl booths until the original red color started to peek through the filth. We took down the rotting boards from the windows, letting in the light. Each small victory felt monumental. Clearing a single shelf, polishing a patch of chrome, sweeping a section of the floor clean. These were our triumphs. The town watched us. We could feel their eyes on us as we worked, a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Harmony Creek was a town that had been slowly dying for decades. Young people left and never came back. Businesses closed. The sight of two kids trying to resurrect the old abandoned diner was an anomaly. Some of the older residents would stop by, peering in the newly cleaned windows. They were people who remembered Rose. An old man named Hank, who ran the hardware store, was the first to offer help. He showed up one afternoon with 2 buckets of paint. "Your grandmother gave my boy his first job," he said, his voice gruff. "She was a good woman. The town's not the same without her." He didn't say more, just left the paint and walked away. The next day, a woman named Maria, who owned the small grocery store, brought us a box of fresh vegetables and a loaf of homemade bread. "You need to eat," she said simply. Slowly, cautiously, the community started to embrace us. They saw we weren't just passing through. They saw the blisters on our hands. They saw the exhaustion in our eyes and the stubborn set of our jaws. They recognized the same grit that had defined our grandmother. The biggest challenge was the kitchen. It was a greasy, rusted nightmare. The massive grill looked like it would never work again. The plumbing was shot. We knew we were in over our heads. We got a quote from a professional restoration company. $20,000, just for the kitchen. It was a devastating blow. That was twice what we had left. That night, sitting in the clean but still empty diner, despair washed over me for the first time since we'd made our choice. The dream felt impossible again. We had the will, but we didn't have the resources. "We can't do it, Maya," I said, the words tasting like ash. "It's too much." Maya didn't answer right away. She was looking at a framed photo we had found in the box of letters. It was a picture of our grandmother, young and smiling, standing proudly in front of the diner when it was brand new. "Grandma didn't give up," she said softly. The next morning, we put a sign in the window, hand-painted on a piece of cardboard. "Community Cleanup Day, this Saturday. Coffee and donuts on us." We spent the last of our grocery money on cheap coffee and a dozen boxes of donuts from the next town over. We had no idea if anyone would come. We just knew we couldn't do it alone. That Saturday, I woke up convinced we had made a terrible mistake. What if no one showed up? The humiliation would be worse than the failure. But at 8 in the morning, a pickup truck rattled into the parking lot. It was Hank from the hardware store. He had a toolbox and 2 of his sons with him. Then another car pulled up, and another. Within an hour, there were 30 people in our parking lot. Farmers, teachers, the town mechanic, the librarian. People we had never even spoken to. They came with tools, with cleaning supplies, with calloused hands, and a quiet willingness to work. Maria brought a huge pot of chili for lunch. The town's retired electrician, a man named George, spent the entire day in the kitchen, patiently taking apart the grill, cleaning every component, and diagnosing the wiring. Hank's sons helped me rip out the old, corroded pipes, while Hank himself showed Maya how to properly reglaze a window. People scrubbed floors, painted walls, and pulled weeds. They worked all day, fueled by donuts and coffee and something more. A shared memory of what this place used to be. They weren't just helping us. They were reclaiming a piece of their own history. By the end of the day, the diner was transformed. The walls were a fresh coat of pale yellow. The floors were clean enough to eat off. And in the kitchen, George wiped his greasy hands on a rag and flipped a switch. With a low hum and a flicker, the lights above the grill came on for the first time in 15 years. A cheer went up from the small crowd gathered in the kitchen. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth and generosity of these strangers, I understood what my grandmother meant. This place wasn't just a building, it was the heart of a community, and it was slowly starting to beat again. The months that followed were a blur of hard work, small victories, and deepening connections. The community's help hadn't solved all our problems, but it had given us the one thing we needed most: momentum. With the kitchen functional, we could focus on the details. We reupholstered the booth seats ourselves, watching online tutorials late into the night. We sanded and varnished the countertop until it shone. We found our grandmother's old recipe book hidden in a kitchen cabinet, the pages filled with her familiar looping script. Recipes for buttermilk pancakes, for chili, for her famous apple pie. It felt like she was right there with us, guiding our hands. We decided to have a grand reopening. We set a date, 6 months to the day after we had arrived in Harmony Creek. The news spread through the town like wildfire. We didn't have money for a new neon sign, so Hank helped us build a beautiful wooden one, with Rose's Place carved into it, just like the original. The day before the reopening, a long black car pulled into our newly paved parking lot. Mr. Davies from Apex Holdings got out, looking out of place in his expensive suit. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked defeated. He walked up to me as I was sweeping the front porch. "I just wanted to see it for myself," he said, his eyes scanning the restored diner. "My company, we underestimated you. We underestimated this town." He handed me a business card. "If you ever need a corporate sponsor for a little league team or something, give me a call." He got back in his car and drove away. It wasn't an apology, but it was a surrender. We had won. The reopening was more than we could have ever dreamed. The entire town showed up. The diner was packed, the air filled with the buzz of conversation, the clatter of plates, and the smell of fresh coffee and frying bacon. Maya worked the counter, pouring coffee and taking orders, a genuine, radiant smile on her face. I was in the kitchen, working the grill, my hands moving with a confidence I hadn't known I possessed. I looked out through the service window and saw it all. I saw Hank arguing with George about politics over a piece of pie. I saw Maria laughing with her friends in a booth. I saw kids, real kids, spinning on the stools, their faces alight with joy. We weren't just serving food. We were serving memories. We were serving community. We were serving hope. At the end of the night, long after the last customer had left, Maya and I sat in our corner booth, the same one where we had read our grandmother's letters. We were bone-tired, but filled with a profound sense of peace. We had done it. We had taken a ruin and built it into a home. Not just for us, but for the whole town. We weren't the lost, broken kids who had stepped off that bus 6 months ago. We were business owners. We were members of a community. We were home. I looked out the big window at the quiet main street of Harmony Creek, at the warm light from the diner spilling out onto the pavement. I thought about the nature of inheritance. Some people inherit money or property. We had inherited something far more valuable. We had inherited a choice to run from our past or to build a future, a choice to take the easy money or to fight for something that mattered. Our grandmother didn't just leave us a diner.
She left us a legacy of resilience. She taught us, through letters written across time, that the things worth having are the things you have to fight for. She taught us that home isn't a place you're given, but a place you build, with your own two hands, surrounded by people who believe in you. The rust and the decay hadn't been a sign of neglect. They had been a disguise, a shield. Beneath all that damage was something strong and beautiful, just waiting for someone to see its true worth. It's a lesson I think about every single day. How many things in our lives do we write off as broken, as worthless, as too far gone? How many people? How many dreams? Sometimes all it takes is a willingness to look past the rust, to see the potential that lies beneath, and to have the courage to start scrubbing. This journey has taught me that you can't always choose where you come from, but you can absolutely choose where you belong. Maya and I, we belong here, in this small town, in this little diner that our grandmother protected for us. And our story, the story of Rose's place, is still being written. One cup of coffee, one piece of pie, one new friendship at a time. It's not an easy life, but it's a good life. It's a real life, and it's ours. So I want to ask you something. What in your life looks like a rusted-out diner right now? What dream have you written off as impossible? I want you to think about it, and I want you to share it in the comments below. Because this community we're building here, it's a place for people who understand that the best things in life often start out looking like a wreck. Your stories matter. They are a testament to the same kind of resilience and hope that rebuilt this place. If our story resonated with you, if you believe in second chances and the power of not giving up, please subscribe to the channel. We have a lot more to share. Thank you for listening. And from our little corner of the world to yours, remember to look for the beauty beneath the rust. You might be surprised by what you find.